Good morning, everyone, and welcome to part one of BDO's two-part Back to Community webinar series. My name's Matt Coulter, and I'm one of the audit partners in our Auckland office. I've worked with a number of public benefit entities over the years, as well as volunteering on a number of PBE boards. Across our BDO network, we act for a large number of organisations in this sector, and we recognise the hugely important role it plays in New Zealand society. Today we'll be looking at how your organisation can thrive in a post-COVID-19 New Zealand by standing out from the crowd. It's generally accepted that funding sources will be constrained post-COVID-19, and all organisations will be looking for ways to ensure their sustainability and maintain relevance. Now more than ever, it's important to have clarity of purpose. In other words, what's the problem your organisation is trying to solve? Why does it exist? If you're part of the management or governance of a public benefit entity, as well as making sure your organisation could survive through these unprecedented times, you will no doubt have been looking forward and thinking, how can we change our operating model to better suit the new normal? And how do we secure the level of income we need to serve our members, our beneficiaries, or our target sector of society? We have a great panel of speakers today, with two guest presenters joining me, as well as one of our BDO experts. First up will be Nicola Breho. She is a strategic advisor for Foundation North, one of New Zealand's largest funders, providing grants to organisations in Auckland and Northland. Following Nicola will be Sean Barnes. Sean is the Director of Social Procurement at Akina Foundation, New Zealand's leading impact development organisation. Our BDO expert today is Ria Cowell. Ria is based in our Christchurch office and is a senior strategy consultant. I'll hand over to our presenters shortly, and following that, we'll answer your questions. Please feel free to ask these via the chat function as we go through the webinar. Before handing over to our presenters, I wanted to set the scene for our discussion today. As we all know, the PBE sector in New Zealand is a huge part of our society and the economy. The numbers shown on the screen indicate the scale of the sector. We have over 40,000 incorporated societies and charitable trusts, as well as over 27,000 registered charities, of which a large proportion are either incorporated societies or charitable trusts. While registered charities are just one part of this sector, thanks to charity services, it's also the part we have the most insight into. Charities operate in a broad spectrum of areas, such as health, education, social services, sport, religious activities, culture, the arts, and more. We have one of the highest per capita number of charities in the world, with one charity for every 190 people. Charities therefore have a massive impact on the lives of New Zealanders. This may be as an employee, a volunteer, a supplier, or a recipient of the services provided by a charity. PBEs have always had an interesting conundrum regarding reserves. The question of how much is enough, but not too much, has been hotly debated over the years. Have too much, and the public and funders will think you don't need support. Have too little, and in tough times, as now, the organisation faces the very real danger of going out of business. For the most part, the majority of PBEs do not have huge reserves to fall back on. And when times get tough, they are therefore reliant on their ongoing income streams. If we take a look at where PBEs generally get their funding from, we can see there are a variety of different sources. With most commercial operations predicted to struggle over the coming months, investments likely to decline in value, and an expectation that getting funds from the public will become more difficult, it makes sense that PBEs will be looking to funders to fill this void. Whether it be government, community trusts, or private funders and philanthropic organisations. Some of the larger funders may have sufficient reserves to continue to provide the same level of funding through a downturn. However, others will need to become more selective with the organisations they choose to fund. We've already seen examples of local and central government entities looking to reduce the level of services provided, or at a minimum hold contract values on a par with the year before, ignoring the impact of inflation and wage rises. Our presenters today are going to give you some insights into how funders work and explore some of the ways organisations can differentiate themselves from the crowd and maximise their share of the funding available. I'll hand over now to Nicola to give her views from a funder's perspective.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Nicola Breho aho. As Matt said, I'm the Strategic Advisor at Foundation North, the community trust for the people of Auckland and Northland. We were established in 1988 as one of 12 regional community trusts, and we grant approximately $35 to $40 million each year through a range of funding programs. Matt's asked me to speak to what funders look for, and whilst I'll be sharing with you the perspective of Foundation North, this will be widely applicable to other funders as well. The first consideration is whether your organisation or entity is eligible to apply. Foundation North can only grant to a registered organisation, that being a charitable trust or incorporated society, a Maori entity, or an entity that's on the charities register, and also where delivery will benefit the people in the Auckland or Northland region. We also have a requirement that entities have been operating for 12 months and are able to provide annual accounts. In some cases, there might be a workaround for this. For example, we do consider applications from umbrella groups on behalf of groups that don't meet these requirements. The second key consideration is whether what you want a grant for has a strong fit with our strategic focus. Every funder will have a strategic intent or area of particular interest. Foundation North has determined 4 areas of focus: increased equity, social inclusion, regenerative environment, and community support. We would be looking at any application to see the degree to which the request aligned to one of these focus areas. Both the eligibility requirements and our strategic area of focus are detailed on our website. It's always a good idea to check these out first. I'd also recommend reviewing the other entities that have received funding, as this is a good way to see if your application is likely to succeed. If in doubt, make contact and ask. It's much better to dialogue it through than waste time and energy on submitting an application that's not going to succeed. Once we've determined eligibility and a fit with our strategic focus, we then look at issues such as whether there is a need for what your organisation plans to do and whether your organisation has the financial, organisational and other capabilities needed to deliver. We look at your organisational health. What's the financial fitness of the organisation? What's the state of working capital? Does it have any operating surplus or deficit? How many months of operating expenditure are there? Are there any reserves? We also look at the usual assessment of income and expenditure, assets and liabilities. And we're keen to see if there's a diverse revenue stream. How does the quantum of the grant relate to the overall income and budget? Then we look at your track record. Can the organisation effectively deliver? Have they done this before? We're keen to see if you work well with others. Who are you networked with? Are you connected in such a way that will enable success? Do you evaluate what you do? How do you know if things are going well? How is impact and success measured? Is there evidence that as an organisation you learn and adapt? We also like to consider if there's adherence to established standards of practice. This is especially important for services or initiatives involving children, young people, or vulnerable people, or where there is a reliance on volunteers. When it comes to risk, we look to see that consideration has been given to these, such as health and safety, and that where appropriate, mitigation plans have been put in place. Well, having outlined what it is that we look for when we're assessing applications for funding, let me share with you some of the sources of information that we go to. We consider a wide range of sources of information. This includes those that are required to be submitted with the application, such as a budget for the initiative and your annual accounts. But we also go to other sources, including your constitutional charter, your annual reports, information that's on the charities register, including who your trustees are. We look at your website and your social media presence. Who do you collaborate with? Who have you received funding from? And we may also ask to see some of your governance and operating policies if that's relevant to your particular request. In this COVID-19 affected world, we recognise that organisations will be under real strain and times are very challenging. It's likely that we'll also explore aspects with you such as, have any government subsidies been accessed? Has there been any rent subsidies from landlords? Has a mortgage holiday from the bank been considered? Are there any tagged funding or reserves that can be applied to OPEX? What are the forward plans for income and ongoing viability? And we're keen to understand what impact COVID has had on delivery and how this has impacted future plans. We always encourage our applicants and grantees to make contact and talk through their situation with us. Never hesitate to call a funder and seek the information you need. It's always better to talk things through and be as well prepared as possible before submitting that funding application. I hope that was helpful and look forward to our further discussion in the Q&A later. I'll hand now over to Ria and Sean in Christchurch. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Nicola. Ko rea taka wingoa, ko taupiri toku maunga, ko waikato toku awa, ko tainui toku waka, ko tainui toku iwi, ko Ngāti Te Ata toku hapu, ko tahuna kaitoto toku marae, ko Ria Kaulaho. My name is Ria Kal and I work at BDO Christchurch as a strategy advisor, and my role is all about helping organisations to determine where they want to go for the future and what we can do to help them get there. Critically understanding what we can do to help them measure success along the way, both financial and non-financial. I'm sitting here with Dr. Sean Barnes, who's the Director of Social Procurement from Arkina, and Sean and I will run us through the next part of this session. So I'll hand it over to Sean now to introduce himself.
Ko ruapehu te monga, ko whanganui te awa, ko Sean Barnes taku ingoa. Thank you, it's lovely to be here, and yeah, I'll just take you through what Arkina does first of all, and we'll get into some discussion.
Let's go to the next slide. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, so our role at Arkina and what we do is help organisations navigate what impact means and to maximise that. So we're really working in impact development. That's the primary part of our work, and we work with the private sector, government and social enterprises and not-for-profits to increase their impact and work across a number of different sectors or different aspects, including impact measurement and strategy, impact investment and social procurement.
Which is your niche area.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so that's what I look after. Right, good point. So what we wanted to do today is just go through and take you through what impact's all about from our perspective. And I think the key thing, if we go to the next slide, around impact is we define impact as the positive social, environmental, or cultural change that happens. And what we're really interested in is the outcomes that happen because of an activity. And this is the key notion: is are you actually making a difference for the thing that you stand for, whether it's people or planet, and being able to answer that question. And really the key thing that the key aspect of this is the distinction between an activity and an outcome, and we'll see a bit more about that. Yeah, we've got an example that we were going to explore, really. Yeah,
and as you can see on the slides, the sort of activity in this example is a running skills training, with the outcome being people get long-term jobs. So just to unpack that a little bit further, if you take for an example an organisation that supports people with intellectual disabilities to get employment, they might do so by procuring different contracts for light manufacturing or similar, and then hosting a range of different programs to get people with intellectual disabilities into jobs or into work with them. So that's really the activity that they're doing. They're procuring contracts, they're running training, they're employing people. But the outcome is sort of the more interesting part that it's really hard to sort of pull it through, sort of, and it's determining sort of are people with intellectual disabilities feeling more confident in being able to seek employment, and vice versa, are the businesses feeling more confident in employing people with intellectual disabilities, and over a long term potentially is a differential rate for unemployment becoming between people with intellectual disabilities and those without becoming narrower.
Absolutely. So we'll talk more about the interaction of those different stages and outcomes. If we go to the next slide, we kind of hold the view that an impact-focused organisation like a public benefit entity, or even a business that stands for sustainability or is trying to generate an impact, needs both a business model, which is the trading part, but equally it's it's also relating to funders. How do you use the money? Where does it go inside your organisation? That's what we mean by the business model and an impact model. And to have those two together is really quite critical to think about. And the impact model, as we'll talk about, is the thing that helps you define what you're actually trying to achieve. How are you creating impact? How well are you doing that? And there's a number of components that we'll just talk through as we go along. I guess, for you, how do you see an impact model fitting in organisations?
I think I've sort of put the governance hat on, and I think about like a board table, and if you're sitting there and you're trying to say, are we doing what we said we would do? Are we realising our purpose? Are we achieving what we think we're achieving? The financial model and the business model is one vehicle to determine how you're going, the sort of hygiene factor about whether you're profitable, whether it's a sustainable model you're running. But most importantly, the impact model will really speak the story. So it might not necessarily consist of data and from a numbers perspective. It might be an impact story that talks about what an intervention from your organisation achieved in someone's life. So I think it's critical to have the two, to walk on both sort of sides of it, to then be able to say we are actually progressing change and it is a sustainable impact we're seeking.
Yeah. And another important thing to call out is that there is an integration between the business model and the impact model and where the money goes, and that's a really interesting thing to explore. So I guess if we go to the next slide, the reason why this is really important is that by being able to demonstrate and measure your impact, then it opens up a whole world of possibilities, from actually understanding whether what you're doing is actually working and improve type concept, but also the partnerships, the opportunity to find alignment with other entities that are seeking the same things, even from a funder's perspective as well. Like the funders have objectives they're trying to achieve, and you'll be able to demonstrate those. But ultimately, it's about increasing the impact that you're having and really driving that forward. But the challenges, I think, that sit in this space is the language piece. It's quite often a complicated space to navigate, and when you're dealing with complicated issues you're trying to resolve, that's part of it, but also the limited resources that organisations have.
And I think as well, the language piece is really interesting, because when you talk about collaboration, I think that's what's going to be discussed on next week's webinar. It's how do you have the same lingo that partner organisations can make sure they're all progressing towards the same impact, because they might be using different words that describe the same thing, but it's sort of getting clarity around the wording first.
Yeah, fortunately things are getting a bit better in that space. If we go to the next one, the other, I guess I won't go into depth in this diagram, but ultimately there's a circle here. There's a learning circle, and impact is something that is iterative, and it is a hypothesis, and you're looking for evidence that it is what you think it is for the people you're trying to benefit, and also engaging with those people. So you've got to go around this circle and keep learning and iterating to a point. Like, we'll come back to that. We don't want to keep going around.
It exists for a point in time, so that you sit down today and you identify the impact, you talk to your shareholders and you check the evidence, and then you perform the rest of the circle. But what you're defining and seeking to measure and monitor is for that point of time, so it will change. So you might not potentially have a data set for what you dream to be able to measure, but you need to measure the point in time now and be able to say next year we've made a difference, and so on and so forth. So over time you might be refining some of those indicators, but you have to start.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So if we skip a couple of slides, the talking about an impact model, we use this model called a theory of change or a logic model a lot, and it's a really powerful, it comes back to what we were talking about at the start around you undertake a series of activities, something changes, and then over the short term, medium term, long term, something changes. So when we're talking about the example before around greater employment of people with disability in the mainstream employment workspaces, that's really quite a long-term change that we're going to see. And there's got to be a series of things that you're looking for to identify that you're actually moving towards that and you're actually benefiting those people and actually contributing to that change. So theory of change outlines the activities that you do, what changes and what's the result that you're trying to get to. But ultimately the key part of this is why it makes sense. It actually defines the logic that you're applying to assume that you get to the end point you're trying to say you're getting to. So that's the key part of this.
And if it doesn't link up, so you might find that historically your organization has always done these activities and we've always sought this impact, but through this model you might actually go through and see what evidence you have, short, medium term, long term, and it might not actually link as strongly as it used to historically.
But also it might identify new areas for you to explore to have a better impact and things like that. So just on the next slide, why would you have an impact model? We talked about this. How do you plan? How do you deliver? How do you partner? And in the measurement, improving and communicate. There's lots of different reasons, and you know, some of those are outward, some of those are inward, some of those are strategic, and some of those are for your partners as well. So and then the other, on the next slide, we're talking about the stages of impact. So this is a journey. Like, let's not understate that this can be very complicated. It's going to take a bit of time, but ultimately you need these pieces to start to come together. And I would argue that the impact model is very primary to this, because if you haven't got anything nailed down, you might just start measuring all sorts of things, but you're not too sure why. And then your reporting's influenced by that, and then the way you manage your impact's influenced by that as well. So you've got to work through these stages, but that.
And we see it as well from lots of organisations that have a multitude of different funding contracts from different organisations, and they need that from a sustainability point of view to sort of stay functioning. But over time, they just are bolting on all these different measures to prove what they're doing is impacting, but they actually haven't made sure that it aligns with where they want the organisation to go. So if they didn't have their own impact model to be able to evidence and track and progress everything, it means that they could just be bolting on all these different things that are still doing good, but they're not the good that you were wanting. That's or what your primary purpose was.
Or equally holding on to things that are historic, which is another common trait. If we just go to measurement, this is obviously the really
the gritty
kind of gritty part, isn't it? It's a really, really important part. And if we go to the next slide, what we're really talking about here is, that measurement is like, start simple, really. I mean, a lot of organisations already have a lot of measures that are available. They may not look for them. They may not realise that they're there. But ultimately, a lot of organisations already have a lot of this stuff, and I know you guys see that with the organisations you work with.
Yeah, and I think it's as well the starting of a journey like this. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. It can be it is overwhelming, because you're asking people to evidence and find all this data when they're already busy doing their day-to-day jobs. So where they can start and how they can actually start to identify both the qualitative and the quantitative measures can be overwhelming. So we were talking with a business the other day that said we can kind of have a look through our income statement and we can see, we can tag the income and say, well, this one we're going to use that money for profit, and this one we're going to use that money for purpose. But that only shows one picture. It only shows the financial picture of what they're doing. And they said we do a lot of work in the community. We do all these things. Our time is really what we're donating here, and we're giving a lot of it. How do we measure that, and what does it look like? And do we need to have a little clock that we start and stop on everything? And we sort of sat back and said, well, what we're wanting to measure is time and your investment in it. So they use their calendars on Outlook, and that's how they record what they're doing. So we sort of said, well, maybe we'll extract that into Excel, and then you could just go from a monthly basis and see how many hours you've done that per month towards your purpose. So that's another impact measure that you can sort of start quantifying, and in the future it might be great to have a more elaborate sort of mechanism for it. But today you've actually got available data that show that you're progressing to where you want to go to.
And if we go to the next slide, that's really what this slide's about. It's about striking that balance. So you measure the time, but you also are talking to the people who benefit from what you're doing, what changed, that example, you know, the resources that they put into schools.
Yeah.
What's the feedback from the teachers, the students, the stories? So there is a balance of qualitative and quantitative, and the quantitative numbers are really important, and I'm sure there'll be a funder's perspective on that as well. But the qualitative is the stuff that people can understand in the stories, and it is a bit of a balance. What we find quite often is that if it's so overwhelming, people just don't measure anything because they feel like they're not going to get it right the first time, or it's not going to be good enough, or you kind of throw yourself into over committing and grabbing too many things, and it is like,
or you're measuring the same thing with multiple like the same actual thing you're measuring with 5 different indicators, but one could have been the standalone for all of it. Yeah,
and that is to some degree complicated by when there's an absence of guidance and people just
go noisy rather than.
That's right. Yeah. Or you might get asked for multiple different angles of something from different organisations.
I think as well, just on the story part of it, Matt might be able to say how much accountants love numbers, but the story part is also really critical. So we have boards that have a story that gets read at the beginning of every board meeting that is just a story from someone that they've worked with, or some intervention that they've done, and it might just be a minute-long video, or it could be something that someone's written in, or a comment that's been made online. But those stories really matter because they do sell that bigger story that a number can't speak to.
That's right, absolutely. If we'll just have a look at some of the key things that we've covered, but also some key lessons, I suppose. Basically, if you don't know your impact, it's going to be hard to increase it, and also to determine whether it's actually really happening. So that's a really good reason to think about this. And equally, others won't know your impact if you can't report it. People will have assumptions around your organisation or perspectives from what they can see. But this is a way of really, getting on top of that and front footing it and being really clear.
And a funder will really be able to quickly pick up what you're applying for and your reason for being and your funding document, and really be able to evidence it and see it, rather than it just be a story that you have to sort of tell time and time again. It's not a document that sits by itself and can get sent to someone like Nicola to assess. It's something that you have to have a meeting to show, and you should have both. You should be able to say it verbally, but it should stand alone in a piece of paper as well.
And the other thing is that the direction of travel is really important, and this is where we're talking about those medium and long-term outcomes. This is what government really values. Government has these intractable, but also these intractable problems they're trying to solve through seeking services from other organisations. And if you can't demonstrate your direction of travel and that you're heading the right way, then that's where it can make things tricky. But also the partnerships aspect, and I know this is a topic of next week. Now, what we've found is that when you can cut through the kind of language and those aspects of impact and start to get some common ground, then you realise there's a lot more opportunities for partnerships and collaboration than potentially, and that's across sectors as well. So that's community, business, and the government sectors, and how do those pieces all move together? So absolutely.
It's similar to a business model or a strategic plan. It's mapping it all, and if you don't map it, you don't know when this new business opportunity comes along, whether it's within your value set of what you want to do or how you want to behave, or the purpose that you're wanting to achieve. You can easily go off course, and you can do it alone, versus when you've got that sort of impact story, you have similar conversations you can have with others. In terms of impact measurement, there are so many measures out there that have already been the guidelines have already been written about how you can sort of determine them, so it doesn't have to be overwhelming. And I know that's what we're finding a lot of organisations saying that it is. And also, when they have lots of funding contracts, they have so many different things that they're trying to map that it becomes really hard, and it's noisy. So we have clients that set up tracking codes and zeros, so they can actually track what the funding's doing and all the different areas and activities that they're doing. We have clients extracting their Excel sheets, their Outlook calendars to Excel to then be able to do it. So it's actually sort of taking a deep breath and stepping back and saying, of the data we have available and where we're wanting to go and the activities we're doing, how can we map that bit in between?
Yeah, absolutely. So Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so thank you, Sean, and thank you, Nicola, for your kōrero around it all. It's been really interesting to sort of start this dialogue, and it is a dialogue. It is something that you sort of just need to start thinking about, because it's not going to go away. It is something that's going to become more and more prevalent, especially with the changes to the statement of service performance that's going to be required, and I'm sure Matt can speak to a little bit further. But yeah, thank you both for your time, and I think now what we're going to do is hopefully start tackling some of the questions that you've started posting in the Q&A, and Matt might be the one to facilitate that for us. So thank you.
Thanks, Ria, and thanks Sean as well, and also to Nicola. That's really interesting stuff, and I think it always makes our kind of dealing with the numbers just so much more interesting and engaging when there's those stories behind the scenes and really dealing with the true purpose of an organisation. I mean, it's probably fair to say sometimes the auditor's role might not be considered the most exciting, but you know, when we pull this kind of realm into it, I just think it makes it so interesting, and also to see every organisation that I deal with, no matter how small or big they are, have such cool stories to tell, and they all make an impact, obviously to varying degrees, but they make a huge impact on the lives and things of people that they look to support. I think as well, the conversations that Ria and Sean were drawing out there are so great for an organisation to have, both operationally and at a strategic level with your board, because it can really define and change the way an organisation operates, and it can really end up realigning priorities and things, because once you get into those conversations, when you start them, you really don't know where they're going to end up, which I think just makes them all the better. As well as from what Ria and Sean said before, that I think you know, an organisation can kind of end up evolving organically, and really they end up focusing on things that are dictated to by funders, particularly the large contracts for service delivery, etc. And it really is good to have that reset and come back and look at, you know, what are we really here for? And the same, I'm sure, you know, Nicola would agree as well, that if you have an application from an organisation that's got a really clear purpose and can really demonstrate what they're doing, and better yet, what they're already achieving and looking to do more of, it's just so much easier to say yes and, you know, give them that funding that they want and they need. So we've got plenty of questions coming in. So let's move on to some of those now. So just looking back through our list. So the first question we've got is for Nicola. So Nicola, in terms of differentiating applicants from the crowd, do funding applications for sustainable development type projects get a higher priority than applications that cover merely ongoing operating costs?
I'm struggling to understand the context of the question there. Sustainability of the organisation, is it, or of the initiative?
So I think funding applications that are covering, I guess, projects and that kind of thing, rather than covering day-to-day operating costs. That might be a better way to frame it.
Oh, I see. I think well, as a funder, we recognise the importance and requirement of operating costs. I mean, you know, let's face it, without I mean, that's kind of the engine room to some extent of an organisation and an entity, and what's required for it to be able to deliver to its purpose. You know, we're also mindful as a funder that sourcing operating costs for aspects of expenditure like salaries can be challenging. I mean, that there are some funders who overtly exclude that. So we're mindful of that being an important part of what organisations need to deliver to their purpose and intent. So it's really, I'm not sure we would weight one over the other. Again, it comes back to, you know, what I spoke to earlier around the alignment with the strategic intent that we as a funder would hold, and does the organisation and its initiative, is that going to contribute to progressing the area of focus that we're particularly interested in and aligned to. So yeah, I'm not sure we would weight one above the other. It is about seeing that connection to impact, and will in what ways would a grant from us achieve that impact or contribute to that impact, enable that impact.
Okay, thanks, Nicola. That's really helpful. We've got another one for you here, actually. So, so the next one is this is a little bit down the same line, but how much weight does a funder place on if you receive an annual report that covers impact reporting or has a statement of service performance? How much weight do you place on that versus the information that you require in your grant application form?
Again, it's about all of those sources of information feeding into an overall assessment. I think the statement of service performance and the annual report are really effective tools for communicating the impact that has happened, and kind of confirming the strategic focus of the organisation that's making the application. So, you know, they're important sources of information from that perspective. But equally, the information that supports the particular request are also important. You know, the extent to which the budget for the initiative is sound, as well as those other aspects that I spoke to in terms of the organisation's broader health and capabilities as well. So I think it's a matter of all of those aspects being woven in together rather than one having a greater weight than the other.
Yeah, great. That makes sense. We've just got one here asking, or making a comment for a start. Although the discussion has been in relation to funding, what is BDO seeing its clients are doing in practice in terms of achievement of cost reductions? And I think, like all businesses, these organisations are. I think all organisations are looking to see where they can reduce costs as well. And obviously, that just makes that job of having to find the funding a little bit easier. But I think, in terms of maybe a general comment around the sector, you won't find too many that have a whole lot of fat they can trim. These organisations run pretty lean, because by nature, even in good times, funding is hard to come by. You know, we see organisations that get sponsorship, if they're that kind of organisation, right through to looking for public donations, looking for grant funding. You know, that's just getting harder and harder to find, and there's just more priorities out there. Society is changing, and it is tough. But I really do think that costs will be being cut where they can, but I think there's probably limited scope for that. We've got another question here that I can throw across to Ria and Sean. So this ties into Ria's comment about the statement of service performance, and someone wanting to know, are impacts and outcomes the same thing? So those of you who've been doing statement of service performance for a few years will be familiar with the term outcomes, and that's a specific term in the statement of service performance, whereas obviously Sean and Ria have been talking about impact. So maybe you guys could cover that one off.
Yeah, well, the way we just described it in the impact model there is that the outcomes are the things leading towards the ultimate impact. So that would be the distinction. I'm not 100% clear on the definition that you're referring to in the statement of service performance. It'd be interesting to understand that. But ultimately, if you think of the outcomes of the time stages of change, and those are the things that you're trying to change, and
it's the evidence that indicators are not proof that the impact is happening, but they have a strong correlation. So you've got your activity, you've got the sort of outcome that's showing you're doing something, something's happening. But the impact, or when we just discuss impact, it's that sort of longer term ultimate goal. So if you take the people with intellectual disabilities example, it might be that barriers for participation for people with intellectual disabilities are coming down
or non-existent.
So yeah, like those sort of big sort of picture goals, and then working your way back
in a logical way.
So using that logical theory of change or impact model. Maybe you want to give the petrol gauge example to.
Absolutely. And then when the measures come in, it's like the petrol gauge on your car. It's telling you whether it's the evidence that the change is actually happening. So the change you outline as a series of outcomes is actually happening. So hopefully that makes more sense.
Yeah, that's great. I think in terms of the statement of service performance and the accounting standards, when it refers to at the moment reporting your outcomes and then your outputs, for those who aren't familiar with that, and your outcome is generally phrased in a effectively, if you were working to support the homeless and reduce the incidence of homelessness, then your outcome would be there are no homeless people in New Zealand. That would be your lofty outcome, and then your outputs would be your small achievements along the way. And so I guess your impact, as you say, strong correlation, it falls in the middle there. And what's the evidence that you're actually making progress to your ultimate outcome? I guess to me, I always think your outcome is very closely tied to your mission or your purpose that your organisation has, which is often goes all the way back to its rules or its trustee or similar. So we've got one here. Clearly, many commercial enterprises, so in New Zealand, the Warehouse, Fletcher's is a good example, are struggling, and undoubtedly many charities will be similarly affected. Do you think certain charities will struggle to come through this crisis, and will this result in rationalisation within the charity sector?
Not really for me.
I don't want to answer too much of this because I'll steal my friend Henry's thunder for next week, but I think that the general expectation across the board is, no doubt, I think to a large degree, this sector is going to mirror all businesses, and some will find that this crisis becomes that tipping point, in the same way that with a good, strong business, they should be able to survive this. Obviously, the business world has got some industries that, through no fault of their own, they're going to find it really tough to get through. No doubt, not public benefit entities, some of them will be in the same boat, and I think that's a lot of the focus in next week. So a bit of a plug for Henry's segment next week, really, to look at what can be done there around collaboration, working together, to try and work through those struggles. We've got another one just talking about the process that we've been talking to and referring through the presentation, whether we're talking about pre-COVID-19 or the current and future environment, because the comment here is obviously before a not-for-profit can provide community benefit, their first priority is to survive. So first of all, if I just throw this across to Nicola, the question at the end is saying, will funding organisations take this into consideration with future applications? So I guess being a little bit more willing to fund for survival type operating funding rather than quite so many service delivery type projects.
We certainly recognise the real challenge that the post-COVID world presents for our charitable organisations and our community sector. We're doing the best that we can to take an approach of being understanding and kind and as supportive as we can be, but also are focused on remaining true to our strategic intent and our strategy. So it's not easy to give a black and white answer to, would we as a funder provide sort of support, just a grant just on the basis of maintaining an organisation's existence. Our eye is always going to still be on impact as well. So if it's an organisation that is clear around its purpose and that aligns with our strategic areas of focus, then then the answer is likely to be yes. If where there's convergence from that, then it's probably likely to be less of a positive conversation. And having said that, we're doing all that we can to support organisations to consider all the possibilities of support that exist. And that's challenging as well, because there's a wider range of government announcements, of approaches that various funders are taking, of interesting pivots to business models that we see organisations taking as well, and all of those need to be taken into account. But yeah, we certainly recognise that keeping going is a real challenge for many. But again, it comes back to kind of that alignment with strategic intent and purpose. Impact.
Cool, thanks Nicola, that's great. I've got another one here just asking what role BDO as auditors have in the development of impact and or service performance reporting, and can your clients call on you to help them with development of the relevant measures and reporting thereof? So obviously the Tier 3 smaller charities and other organisations, public sector, have been doing these kind of reports for a while now. For the slightly larger organisations, I can actually see we're going to have a question coming up on that shortly, but those requirements are coming in soon. But we are seeing some of our larger clients, are early adopting those requirements and looking to incorporate that into their annual reports. And it's an interesting meeting of probably two interesting areas where an auditor is trying to collaborate with organisations like Sean's, where there's great impact comes out of it, some great stories, but when it is going to go in the annual report in a statement of service performance, we need to make sure we can audit those measures, and Ria and Sean touched on that around how you go about measuring that impact and what the evidence is, whether that was you have the management of your calendar, whether you undertake surveys, how you do that. And yeah, we've had a couple of clients where they've had consulting firms such as Sean's give them a hand to map out how that's going to look, what sort of information they're going to need, and then collaborate with us at the same time and make sure it's basically going to fit for everybody. And that's what I encourage you to do if you're in that situation, is partner up and also work with your auditor, your accountant, and make sure it's going to fit for everyone. Because in some cases there's a balance to be had there, and maybe the way that information gets presented.
Matt, adding to that, how important is it the evidence of the process that they've gone to get the measure? So from an audit perspective, how important is it that they've got a clear pathway that they are undertaking every time for that measure?
Yeah, that certainly helps. That makes sure that that the information has been clearly thought out and it fits what the organisation does. The one thing we'll always do is go right back to founding documents and look at what the objectives of that organisation are, and make sure that when you're looking at the impact you're seeking to have and then what you're going to report, that flows right through from that founding document, and you're actually covering the spectrum of what your organisation is there to do. And I guess that comes back to your earlier conversations around working out what impact you are seeking to have. And if you have a strategic discussion as a board and actually decide this, we need to change this slightly, I think it's also important to think about what that means for your trustee or your rules. Do they need to change as well? Because it's it's difficult to suddenly focus on one or two key areas if you refer back to a founding document that says you're supposed to be doing these 5 things over here. You know, that really all needs to be aligned and part of the process, which is part of planning right through, and having a clear plan for it. Got another one here. How do you attribute the impact to one particular organisation when there may be more than one organisation providing a similar or the same service? So Rhea and Sean, I'll chuck that across to you.
I was pointing at Sean behind the scenes, saying this one's yours.
Yeah, well, that's part of the impact model. Is ultimately, you know, the example we were using around the elimination of barriers to people with intellectual disability in the mainstream work. You know, ultimately you can't, like, it'd be very,
you can't
bold
claim the whole
for one organisation to
outcome,
claim that whole outcome or impact.
Yeah.
But and that's the power of it. Is attribution is a really key part, and that's where the measures are really important as well, and the logic, and saying, well, we do this that leads to this, will start to give some clarity around what your contribution is and how much of that can be attributed to you when you start looking at a larger kind of area of impact. So it's complicated. Attribution's a very, very interesting area, but again, it comes back to having a really sound logic model and a theory of change, and also that you're seeking the measures that show that it was you that influenced that outcome, not just chance or even did it. The other interesting point around attribution is, was it going to happen anyway? And I think that's a really good question to ask a lot of when you are looking at what you do and how effective it is. It's like, would that have changed anyway? Or
did you speed it up? Was your role in acceleration? We've seen as well models for some that I've seen that they've said there's $1 million saving to the government because of the intervention that we were part of. We're not going to claim the entire $1 million, but we might then do an estimate and say, even if we claim 0.5%, that's still something that, of all the different nuanced areas that influence it, there is a little part that we have done towards it. It's a lot trickier, and to be able to claim, especially from a numbers perspective, the bigger picture,
totally,
it has a lot more workings that's required. So it's sort of something that may become more prevalent in New Zealand as we mature in this space and start to have more longer term data to sort of support it. But in the UK, for example, there are sort of organisations that are doing that, where they're taking a percentage of the overall.
But the key thing is recognising the journey again. It's like you might start with the position of not actually being able to untangle the attribution piece, but over time it's something you should definitely keep in mind.
Or you might see an indicator that you might be able to start being able to build up into your data sets over time that will be able to show it, but at the moment you don't have it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's certainly not it's not an exact science, and it's a pretty good segue into my next question. So Rhea, you commented earlier that accountants like numbers. So how does BDO audit the qualitative stuff being reported in service performance or impact reporting? And yeah, exactly that. It's they actually wrote an entire audit standard to cover this, because they realised there wasn't anything to cover these kind of situations. You can't apply, well, in most cases, you can't apply numeric materiality requirements and things around it. So it's an entirely different approach. But again, you do have, you still go and look for that evidence. So again, it's really important that the entity has followed that process and gone through and can demonstrate how they have, first of all, demonstrated what the impact they're trying to have is, and then how they've gone ahead and measured their progress towards it. And then really we're just looking at those supporting documents, and then there's effectively some leeway either side of that, if you like, for us to go and see the evidence and understand that that's a reasonable position to take. And again, that's why there's a structure around these things. And I've heard Rhea talk before around sustainable development and things as well, and sustainability for businesses, and it's why there's frameworks and things that are coming in there as well, because, you know, Rhea can jump in here, but businesses obviously, if there's not a framework, it's very easy for them to pull in a couple of things that they're doing really well at and maybe not give a balanced view or follow a full process. So yeah, I think that's really important to make sure you can see how the whole plan was developed.
And I think as well, maybe Nicola can comment on that. From a funder's perspective, you want to be looking at the entire big picture. You're not going to be looking at an organisation in isolation. It's going to be that full framework of decision making as well.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think that you know, I was reflecting before, part of the reason that we ask questions around, you know, the extent that there's collaboration or working with others is recognition that, you know, no one's going to achieve impact on their own, that it does take a combined effort, and it's about all the parts of the you know, the machinery or the puzzle, if you like, coming together effectively. I'd also say too, you know, that we as funders, we really appreciate and value qualitative you know, feedback as well as quantitative. So we're not just looking for the numbers. You know, we're looking for a variety of evidence of impact and the logic that sits behind that. So I think the nature of the qualitative information that's been gathered or captured, and how that is then used and influences an organisation's you know, changing the way it might be delivering things, or the way that it might begin to work with you know, and others in different ways. We're interested in how, not only what does that information say about the fact that this organisation is having good impact and achieving its mission and purpose, but also how is it responding to that, and how is that changing and strengthening what it's doing. So that, you know, don't hesitate in providing you know, relevant qualitative information as well as the numbers. It all contributes to an understanding and a picture of impact, which is really valuable.
Yeah, great. So I think we're just about out of time. So I'll just jump in. There's a couple of quick, easy questions I can answer here, and then we might be time to wrap up. So one here is just saying to Ria that your example of employment for people with intellectual disabilities, is there a study that someone could go and read, or an organisation that you have dealings with around that someone could explore more? Either a quick answer, or maybe we take that one. We can take that one offline if need be.
Oh, the quick answer for that. Sorry, I'm not real. But, yeah, if you look up the Aotearoa Disability Enterprises, there's a number of these organisations up and down New Zealand who work in this space, and that's their aspiration, is really reducing those barriers to employment.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Sean. That's great. And just quickly before we wrap up, there's a few questions here around the statement of service performance and the requirement to include that. So initially, people will be aware that the effective date for that requirement for larger charities was coming in for the 2021 December 2021 financial year onwards, but you needed comparatives for this year as well. And there's a proposal at the moment from the XRB to extend that out, push that out a year to 2022, and that's essentially as a result of COVID-19 and saying organisations have got other priorities for their funds, etc. So it's still coming. We've submitted a view on that as BDO nationally, that it's we really think that decision needs to be made really quickly, or they need to continue with it, because at the moment it's going through a proposal and consideration process, and obviously if it comes out that they decide it's going to stay where it is, and organisations have been holding off on the basis of deferral, I think we're going to see some issues and some reporting that comes out that won't be as valuable as it could otherwise have been. And I do then have a comment here from Sharon really along those lines, and saying that given the impact of COVID-19, where available funds are likely to be diminished, isn't it vitally important to provide impact reporting to leverage chances of success for funding applications? And I think I agree there. There's nothing stopping an organisation getting in, early adopting this standard, and really using their annual report as a marketing tool, which I really encourage all my clients to do. So by all means, Whether it's deferred or not, I'd encourage your organisation to really get into that space, impact reporting, you know, and really demonstrating case studies, etc. It's such a great opportunity. Okay, so I think we better wrap up there. We've hit 11 o'clock, so you know, I really thank you for your time today, and I hope you found the presentation useful. If you'd like any further information, please feel free to contact Ria or me, or visit the Akina or Foundation North websites for more information. As I've mentioned, we've already started the impact reporting journey with a lot of our clients, so you know, we're happy to help organisations in this area with the support of organisations like Akina. And Ria and I can also obviously put you in touch with Sean and Nicola directly if you'd prefer. And finally, just a quick plug for next week's seminar with Henry, so part 2 around collaboration opportunities in the PBE sector. So please register for that, and also feel free to forward that information on to any colleagues or contacts that you think might find that webinar of interest. Thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.